In a vast, dense forest far from the nearest town, a creature lived that everyone in the nearby villages both feared and whispered about. It was not just any animal. It was an apex predator, strong, sharp, and unmatched in the wild. Its fur was thick and dark, its eyes bright and intelligent, and every step it took seemed to carry the quiet weight of power. People had been warning each other for years about this creature. Farmers told stories of livestock disappearing in the night. Travelers claimed to have glimpsed its massive silhouette moving silently between the trees. And even hunters admitted they had avoided the forest out of fear. Yet, despite its fearsome reputation, there were strange stories about this predator that made people pause. Some villagers swore that they had seen it watching over humans in unexpected ways. Once, a young boy had wandered into the forest and gotten trapped near a steep cliff. The villagers said the predator appeared suddenly, not to harm him, but to nudge him back to safety with careful, precise movements, almost as if it understood the danger. There were rumors of it defending humans from other wild animals, even saving lives, though people rarely spoke of these incidents loudly. Fear ran deep, and love from a predator was something humans could hardly imagine. One cold morning, the forest was quiet, except for the distant calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. A group of villagers had gathered at the edge of the forest, talking in hushed voices. They were nervous because they had heard the predator was near again. One of them, a young man who often delivered supplies to the forest outpost, had witnessed something unusual a few days earlier. He had seen the predator quietly watching a mother and her small child as they crossed a narrow bridge over a river. The creature didn't approach, but it didn't leave her. It stayed nearby, its eyes following the humans with an intensity that seemed almost protective. Word of this spread quickly, as such unusual events always did. The villagers were confused. How could a dangerous predator, a creature capable of killing without effort, show care for humans? Some thought it was a trick, that the animal was biding its time, waiting for a chance to strike. Others believed there was something different about it, something more than instincts, something almost human in its behavior. The predator, meanwhile, lived day by day in the forest, hunting and roaming as any wild creature would. It did not understand human laws, yet it seemed to understand humans themselves in ways that surprised everyone who came into its presence. When people were in real danger, it appeared, sometimes saving them from accidents, sometimes just guiding them away from harm. Each act added to the legend, and yet the fear of its strength never left the villagers' minds. One evening, the predator observed a group of children playing near the forest's edge. One child fell into a deep ditch, crying for help. Before any adult could react, the predator had moved swiftly, using its powerful limbs to reach the child and gently lift it out. The child's small hands clutched at the predator's fur, trembling, while the villagers watched from a distance, mouths open in shock. The predator carefully placed the child on safe ground and retreated into the shadows, disappearing as quietly as it had arrived. This incident created a stir. People debated endlessly about the creature's intentions. Some said it was too intelligent for its own good, capable of understanding danger and choosing to act with kindness. Others argued that it was still a predator at heart, and anyone who trusted it risked death. Despite the fear, there were whispers of gratitude, of awe at witnessing something that seemed impossible, a predator, showing love toward humans. Local authorities were not blind to the growing attention. Reports came in daily, describing the predator's size, its intelligence, and its strange behavior. Scientists began to take interest, curious about the unusual pattern of interaction between the creature and humans. Wildlife experts noted that predators rarely showed protective behavior toward species outside their own. Some thought this was an anomaly, a unique case that could change the way humans understood animals and instincts. Yet fear remained. Every time the predator's shadow passed across the forest, villagers remembered the stories of attacks on livestock. They remembered the nights when screams could be heard, or when hunters returned empty-handed, shaken by the creature's power. This duality, danger and protection, made the predator a figure of fascination and fear, a living paradox that no one could fully understand. One night, under the pale light of the moon, the predator moved quietly through the forest. Its keen eyes caught the reflection of water as a human figure struggled in the river. Without hesitation, it plunged into the cold current, powerful limbs slicing through the water, and reached the struggling person. With careful movements, it guided the human to safety, supporting them until they could stand on their own. The human looked into its eyes, realizing in that moment that the creature was not attacking, not hunting, but saving. By dawn, the story had spread. Villagers talked about the incident in awe, some shaken, others inspired. Photographs taken by a brave onlooker circulated quietly, showing the predator's massive frame looming protectively over a person who had been moments from disaster. People began to wonder, could a predator truly love humans? Or was this something else, something they could not yet understand? Despite the growing admiration, not everyone was convinced. Fearful voices spoke louder, urging caution. They argued that the predator was still wild, still dangerous, and that no amount of saving humans could erase the threat it posed. The discussions became heated, and a sense of urgency spread among the villagers. They realized that eventually the predator's actions would force humans and authorities to intervene. One way or another. In the forest, the predator continued its routines, unaware of the debates surrounding it. It hunted, rested, and roamed, guided by instincts, but also by a strange awareness of humans. It had saved lives without expectation of reward, acting as if it understood that humans were fragile and needed protection at times. For those who witnessed it, the predator became a symbol of power mixed with compassion, a living reminder that the wild could be unpredictable in ways humans never imagined. As days passed, the tension between fear and admiration grew. The predator had become more than just an animal in the forest. It was a story, a mystery, and a challenge to the human understanding of nature. Each act of protection brought humans closer, but each remembered attack brought them back to caution. The predator existed in a delicate balance, a force of nature caught between its own instincts and the emerging bond it had with humans. It had never meant to harm. This was only the beginning. The predator's life was about to collide with human law, human fear, and human curiosity in ways that no one could have predicted. What had started as whispers at the edge of the forest would soon become a story that would shock the world. A story of an apex predator whose love for humans would challenge everything people thought they knew about the wild. The forest had never been so alive with whispers. After the predator's remarkable act of saving a human from the river, villagers spoke about it everywhere, at the market, along dusty roads, even at the edge of their homes. Some people were still afraid, warning others not to go near the forest, but many were curious, even inspired. They wanted to see the creature for themselves, to understand it. Yet no one could predict what would happen next. Because curiosity and fear were about to collide in a way no one had imagined, the authorities first learned about the predator through these whispers. At first, they ignored the stories, thinking of them as exaggerated tales from villagers who had always been afraid of the forest. But reports kept coming, each more detailed than the last. Farmers claimed it had stopped attacking their livestock for days, only to return at night silently. Travelers reported seeing it watching over people, appearing when danger was near. Scientists and wildlife experts began taking notice, eager to study the anomaly, a predator that might understand humans, that might even care for them. A team of experts was sent to investigate. They arrived quietly in the nearby village, asking questions, taking notes, and observing the forest from safe distances. The villagers were divided in their opinions. Some welcomed the team, hoping they would provide answers or even protect them from the predator. Others were wary, believing that bringing outsiders would provoke the creature or make the situation worse. Still, the team persisted, setting cameras along the trails and using sensors to track movement. For days, they watched and waited. Every rustle in the trees made them hold their breath. Then, late one afternoon, the predator appeared. It moved gracefully, silently, its eyes bright and alert. But this time, it did not attack or hide. Instead, it seemed curious about the humans with cameras, observing them carefully before retreating a few steps, almost as if deciding whether they were a threat. The team was astonished. This was unlike any predator they had studied before. It showed intelligence, awareness, and even caution. Some of the experts whispered that it seemed almost deliberate in its actions, as if it understood their presence and was making choices about how to respond. The villagers, however, were growing nervous. With each passing day, more people came to the edge of the forest to see the predator. Some brought cameras, others brought children, hoping to witness the strange bond themselves. There were near accidents, too. People ignored warnings, climbing too close to cliffs or crossing rivers in unsafe spots, believing the predator would protect them. The creature had saved lives before, but the forest was unpredictable, and even it could not control every danger. One day, a particularly tense moment occurred. A small group of children had wandered too far into the forest while playing. One of them tripped and fell into a fast-moving stream. Panic spread as adults shouted, rushing toward the river. But before they could reach the child, the predator appeared. It moved through the water with powerful strokes, reaching the child and keeping it above the rushing current. The child clung to its thick fur, shivering and crying, while the predator guided it to the riverbank. Adults arrived moments later, hearts pounding, to find the child safe and the predator standing quietly nearby, watching them with those intense, intelligent eyes. The incident was captured by a local who had been nearby, and the footage spread quickly through social media. People across the region were stunned. Some called it a miracle. Others debated whether the creature had intentions, emotions, or simply instincts that humans misunderstood. Authorities could no longer ignore the situation. If the predator continued to interact with humans in this way, there could be accidents or worse. They had to act, not just to protect people, but also to study the animal safely. Plans were made to capture the predator, but no one expected how difficult it would be. The creature knew the forest better than anyone. It could move through dense trees without making a sound, slip through rivers and cliffs with ease, and avoid traps with surprising cleverness. Every attempt to corner it failed, leaving the authorities frustrated and the villagers more fearful. Yet, through it all, the predator did not act aggressively toward the humans who tried to capture it. It observed, sometimes retreating, sometimes leaving subtle signs of its presence, almost as if it understood that the humans meant no immediate harm. Finally, after days of preparation, a successful plan was put into motion. A wide net, reinforced and camouflaged, was set along a narrow path that the predator often used. Experts and trained wildlife officers waited nearby, ready to act quickly. When the predator approached, moving cautiously as always, it was caught in the net. There was no struggle, no attack, only the predator's eyes, wide and alert, meeting the human's gaze. For a moment, it seemed to assess them, to understand what was happening. And then it fell silent, realizing it could not escape this time. The villagers gathered at a safe distance, a mix of fear, curiosity, and awe on their faces. Some cried quietly, afraid that this capture could end badly. Others watched in fascination, unable to take their eyes off the creature that had become a legend in their lifetime. The predator, confined in a large holding area designed for safety, paced slowly, its movements powerful but restrained. It did not lash out or attack, but neither did it show submission. It was calm in a way that only added to the mystery surrounding it. Experts began observing the predator closely. They noted its behavior, the way it reacted to humans, the way it seemed to remember individuals it had seen before. One researcher, who had been documenting the predator for weeks, was amazed by how it would respond differently to each human. It could sense danger, recognize helpful gestures, and even show what appeared to be patience watching, waiting, and learning. The world had never seen a predator like this, one that could be so ferocious and yet so careful, so powerful and yet capable of connection. At the same time, public debate grew heated. Newspapers, television programs, and online forums were filled with discussions about the predator. Was it a threat that needed to be contained for public safety? Or was it a misunderstood creature, deserving of compassion and protection? Experts debated fiercely, and the public was split. Some wanted the predator to be relocated to a sanctuary where it could live freely without risking human lives. Others feared that even with precautions, the creature's instincts could lead to disaster. In the holding area, the predator reacted to its new reality with intelligence that surprised everyone. It was not panicked or aggressive, but alert. It studied the humans around it, watching their movements, understanding routines. Some of the humans tried to approach carefully, extending gestures of peace, offering food, and speaking softly. Slowly, the predator began to respond, showing signs of trust toward those who did not threaten it. It was an extraordinary sight, a creature that could have easily dominated or attacked. Choosing instead to observe and interact with patience, the story of the predator had already reached cities far from the forest. People were captivated by the images and videos. School children learned about it, scientists wrote papers, and journalists traveled to witness it firsthand. Everyone wanted to know, how could such a powerful creature show care for humans? And why did it choose to act this way? The predator, confined but undeterred in spirit, had become more than a wild animal. It had become a symbol of the complexity of nature, a reminder that fear and compassion could coexist in ways humans did not always understand. But even as fascination grew, so did the stakes. The authorities knew that keeping the predator in captivity, no matter how careful, could not last forever. Humans were unpredictable, and the predator's strength was unmatched. A single mistake could end tragically. The decision was made. The predator would have to face human judgment in a formal setting. It would be studied, observed, and ultimately, its fate would be determined by humans who would weigh fear against curiosity, danger against compassion. The predator, still confined, seemed to sense the tension in the air. It paced, observed, and even seemed to anticipate what might come next. Its bond with certain humans, those who had approached it gently and safely, grew quietly. It trusted them in ways it had never trusted others, responding to gestures and moving calmly in their presence. The world was watching, and the predator's next steps would change everything. The stage was set for a confrontation between human law and natural instinct. A creature that had spent its life as the undisputed ruler of its forest domain would soon be judged by humans for behavior that was extraordinary, confusing, and deeply misunderstood. People waited, holding their breath, knowing that what happened next could decide not just the predator's future, but how humans understood their place alongside the wild. The predator's time in captivity had become the center of attention for the entire region. News crews, wildlife experts, and villagers all watched its every move. The once feared creature, known only through whispered stories and legends, had become a living spectacle. People were divided. Some marveled at its intelligence and compassion, while others continued to fear the power it held, remembering the livestock attacks and the nights when its shadow passed too close to human homes. It was inevitable that the authorities would decide the predator's fate formally. Plans were made to bring it to a special facility where experts could study it safely, while courts would review whether it posed too great a risk to remain free. The villagers who had watched it save lives were anxious. They knew what they had witnessed could not be denied. Yet they also feared that humans in power might not see the predator the way they did. The trial began on a clear morning, in a courtroom set up for this unusual case. The room was filled with experts, journalists, villagers, and officials. The predator was brought in, calm but alert. Its massive frame drew a mixture of awe and fear from those present. It did not resist or lash out, though it did pause, studying the humans with eyes that seemed almost thoughtful. For a moment, the courtroom was silent, everyone taking in the reality that a creature so powerful was capable of such restraint and intelligence. The prosecutor began by listing past incidents, highlighting the dangers the predator had caused. Livestock lost, isolated human encounters, and near-miss incidents were all presented as evidence that the creature could not be trusted. The tone was strict, measured, and persuasive, leaving no room for doubt about the predator's potential threat. Many in the courtroom nodded along, recalling their own fears and the warnings they had received for years. Then, witnesses began speaking. Villagers who had seen the predator act protectively came forward. One by one, they told stories of the creature rescuing children, guiding lost hikers out of the forest, and even defending humans from other dangerous animals. Some of the experts presented footage and detailed observations, showing that the predator's actions were deliberate, not accidental. The court listened, intrigued but cautious. It was unusual, almost unprecedented, to see evidence of a predator acting with what could be interpreted as empathy toward humans. Arguments continued for hours. The defense tried to explain that the predator's behavior was unique and should be considered when deciding its fate. They emphasized that its actions had saved lives, that it had formed bonds with certain humans, and that its intelligence allowed it to make choices that could not be ignored. Still, the fear of its power lingered in the minds of many. Even with proof of its good deeds, the idea that a creature so strong could act unpredictably made the outcome uncertain. The predator itself seemed to understand more than anyone expected. It did not growl, fight, or appear confused. Instead, it sat quietly, its eyes following the human speaking, its body tense but controlled. It seemed to sense the weight of the situation, aware that the humans were deciding its life. There were moments when it looked directly at the child it had saved, as if trying to communicate that it only wished to protect, not harm. The courtroom was filled with tension, a mixture of fear, awe, and wonder, all focused on the creature that had become both a hero and a threat. As the trial progressed, emotions ran high. Villagers argued among themselves, some insisting that the predator should be left free or relocated to a sanctuary, others saying it was too dangerous to remain alive. Scientists debated the meaning of its actions, trying to define whether this was instinct, intelligence, or something that could be called compassion. Journalists covered every moment, publishing stories that captivated audiences far beyond the forest. People around the world were following the trial, fascinated by the questions it raised about nature, instinct, and the unusual relationship between humans and the predator. Finally, the judge was asked to make a decision. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath. The predator, standing quietly, watched the humans, aware of the attention and the power they held over its life. The judge's voice was steady but heavy. It was clear that the authorities were influenced not just by evidence, but by fear of the unknown, fear of what the predator might do if it were free, and fear of losing control over a force of nature that had proven it could act in ways humans could not fully understand. The verdict was delivered. The predator was sentenced to death. A hush fell over the room. Some gasped, some cried, and others simply stared in disbelief. Those who had witnessed its protective acts struggled to accept the decision. How could a creature that had saved lives, that had shown intelligence and restraint, be condemned simply because it was powerful? The predator itself did not show anger or fear. It remained calm, its eyes focused, as if it already understood that humans were capable of judgment, even if it did not fully agree with the outcome. The reaction outside the courtroom was intense. Villagers protested quietly but firmly. Journalists debated the morality of the decision, and experts expressed concern that fear had outweighed reason. People asked themselves difficult questions. Was it fair to punish a creature for being exactly what nature had made it? Could humans judge instincts and intelligence that were beyond their own understanding? Could a predator truly be condemned for caring in a way humans rarely saw? Even as plans were made for the execution, the predator continued to act in ways that fascinated those around it. It interacted calmly with the humans who had cared for it, responding to gestures and following instructions without aggression. Scientists recorded its behavior, noting how it seemed to understand complex cues and even anticipate human actions. Its intelligence and composure challenged every assumption about wild animals, creating a mixture of fear, admiration, and guilt among those preparing to carry out the sentence. Late at night, in the holding area, the predator moved quietly. It had become a symbol, not just of the wild, but of the complex relationship between humans and the creatures they fear. Its calmness contrasted sharply with the chaos of human emotions surrounding it. Some of the humans who had grown to trust it watched from a distance, heartbroken at the thought of what was about to happen. They remembered the children it had saved, the lives it had quietly protected, and the intelligence it had shown. They wondered if humans could ever truly understand a force of nature that acted out of something that resembled care. The predator's eyes followed the humans as they moved about, alert and observant. It had survived in the wild for years, avoided hunters, and lived as the undisputed master of the forest. Yet now, in captivity, it faced the most dangerous threat of all, human judgment. Its fate was no longer determined by its strength or intelligence, but by the fear and decisions of people. And yet, despite the looming danger, it remained composed, showing the world that even in the face of death, dignity and awareness could prevail. The tension in the village grew as news of the sentence spread. People debated endlessly. Some planned to protest, some tried to convince authorities to reconsider, and others simply watched, conflicted, unsure what the right course of action could be. The predator, confined and calm, had already done something extraordinary. It had forced humans to confront questions about morality, fear, and the meaning of intelligence in the natural world. As the day of the sentence approached, a quiet sense of urgency filled the air. Scientists worked tirelessly, hoping to find a legal or practical way to save the predator. Villagers, too, prepared to act in small ways, gathering signatures, speaking out, and sharing stories of what they had witnessed. The predator, unaware of the full scope of human politics, continued its silent observation of the world around it. It moved carefully within the holding area, ate when offered food, and sometimes paused to observe the humans with a gaze that was difficult to read intelligent. Calm and aware, the courtroom, the village, and even the world beyond were waiting. Everyone understood that what happened next could change not just the predator's life, but the way humans thought about wild animals, fear, and compassion. Could a predator truly be condemned for caring for humans? Could fear outweigh the evidence of extraordinary behavior? These questions hung in the air, heavy and unanswerable, as the predator continued to exist in a state between life and death, between fear and admiration, between the wild and human judgment. The predator had survived the forest, storms, hunters, and danger of all kinds. But this was the first time it faced a challenge it could not escape on its own. It could not run, climb, or fight its way out. Its fate rested entirely in human hands, and the world was watching. The paradox of this creature, a symbol of power and compassion. Danger and care had reached its most critical moment. The predator's calmness in captivity, its restraint, and its intelligence became a quiet rebellion against the fear that sought to control it. Even as humans debated, judged, and planned its end, it continued to exist with dignity. Its presence reminded everyone who saw it that nature was not simply black and white, dangerous or safe, predator or protector. Sometimes the most powerful forces could also be the most gentle, and the greatest danger could also bring the greatest care. Days passed since the predator had been sentenced. Despite its calm demeanor, a quiet tension hung in the air. The humans around it were busy with preparations, paperwork, and debates. But some could not ignore the growing bond they felt with the creature. One human, a researcher who had spent weeks observing and documenting the predator, found themselves drawn to it in ways that went beyond curiosity. They had seen its intelligence, its restraint, and its unusual care for humans, and over time, a mutual understanding had begun to form. The predator noticed this human immediately. Unlike others, this person approached slowly, with careful movements and soft words. They never rushed, never forced the predator to do anything. At first, the predator simply observed, moving slightly to keep distance, its eyes calculating and aware. But as days went by, it began to respond. A subtle shift in its body language showed trust. It would pause when the human stopped, tilt its head as if listening, and sometimes allow the human to leave food nearby without flinching. The researcher spent hours, every day near the predator, taking notes, watching, and speaking softly. It became clear that the predator understood more than expected. It responded to gestures, seemed to remember specific patterns, and even acted differently around certain humans. The bond grew quietly but steadily, creating an atmosphere in the holding area that was almost peaceful. Other humans noticed the change. Some were amazed, while others remained skeptical, unwilling to let fear be replaced by trust. One afternoon, a small accident occurred in the facility. A human worker had tripped near the enclosure and fell dangerously close to the predator's pen. For a moment, panic filled the air. But the predator acted quickly, moving toward the human with speed and precision. It did not attack or show aggression. Instead, it positioned itself between the worker and the surrounding danger, standing alert and watchful until others could pull the human to safety. Witnesses were stunned. Once again, the predator had acted to protect, responding not to instinct alone, but to a human in need. The incident sparked renewed discussion among the experts. Some argued that this was proof that the predator's behavior was extraordinary, a unique example of intelligence and awareness in the wild. Others, still cautious, warned that no one could fully predict what such a powerful animal might do under stress. Yet the researcher who had been closest to the predator understood something deeper. They realized that the predator's actions were not random or accidental. It had formed a bond, a connection based on trust and understanding, and it was willing to act to protect those it recognized as part of that bond. Evenings were the quietest moments. The predator would sit calmly, watching the humans move about the holding area. Its eyes followed the researcher in particular, observing every gesture, every movement. Sometimes it would approach slowly, sniffing or nudging objects the human had left nearby. There was a rhythm to these interactions, a silent communication that no one else fully understood. For the researcher, these moments became profoundly moving. They realized that fear and respect could coexist, and that the predator had its own sense of awareness, its own understanding of the humans around it. Meanwhile, outside the facility, public interest continued to grow. Videos and stories of the predator's intelligence and protective acts had spread across social media. People debated, shared opinions, and argued passionately. Some called for its release or relocation to a sanctuary, believing it deserved freedom. Others warned that no matter how intelligent or caring, it was still a predator, and the risk could never be fully eliminated. The predator had become a symbol, representing both fear and hope, danger and compassion, and humans everywhere were captivated by the unfolding story. One morning, a new challenge arose. A sudden storm caused a tree to fall near the facility, blocking an important access route. Some humans were trapped nearby, unable to return to safety. The predator, observing from its enclosure, became alert. It paced slightly, its body tense but controlled. The researcher, noticing the change, spoke softly, encouraging it to remain calm. For a moment, the predator's eyes met theirs. And then, with deliberate movements, it approached the area where the humans were trapped. Using its strength and awareness, the predator carefully helped shift debris, creating a safe passage. It guided the humans step by step, positioning itself to shield them from falling branches and other dangers. The scene was breathtaking. Witnesses could hardly believe what they were seeing. A creature once feared for its strength, now using that same strength to protect humans in a moment of crisis. The predator's bond with the humans had grown strong enough that it instinctively knew how to act. Understanding both danger and trust in ways no one had predicted. After the storm passed, the humans involved were shaken but unharmed. They approached the predator cautiously, offering gestures of gratitude. The creature responded calmly, acknowledging their presence without aggression. Its actions had demonstrated something profound, that even a predator, feared and wild, could act with awareness, empathy, and purpose. For the researcher, this was a moment of clarity. They realized that the predator's bond with humans was not merely a curiosity, it was a bridge between two species, a demonstration that understanding and trust could exist even in the wildest circumstances. News of the storm incident spread quickly. People were amazed, inspired, and sometimes fearful, but most agreed on one thing: the predator was extraordinary. Experts debated what this meant for science and for human understanding of animals. Could a predator truly recognize human needs and act accordingly? Was this instinct, intelligence, or something closer to what humans might call emotion? The questions were endless, and the answers remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: the predator had changed the way humans viewed the natural world. Meanwhile, back in the holding area, the predator's relationship with the researcher continued to deepen. It allowed closer interactions, responded to subtle gestures, and even seemed to anticipate human actions. Other humans could see the change, but did not fully understand it. They remained cautious, respecting both the predator's power and its unusual behavior. The researcher, however, knew that something special had developed, a bond based on trust, respect, and shared understanding that transcended fear. The predator's calm demeanor and protective instincts became a daily reminder of what could happen when humans and animals respected one another. It had survived in the wild, avoided hunters, and lived through countless dangers. But now, it was surviving another kind of challenge: the human need to judge and control. Its intelligence and awareness had become a source of fascination and hope, showing that even the most feared creatures could act with purpose and care. As days turned into weeks, the facility became a place of quiet observation. The predator moved with ease, but its eyes were always alert. It seemed to understand the humans around it, recognizing those it could trust and those it still needed to observe. Its bond with the researcher became more obvious, a silent partnership that amazed anyone who witnessed it. The predator had become not just an animal, but a symbol of the complex relationship between humans and nature, a living example of trust, awareness, and the possibility of connection across species at night when the facility was quiet. The predator often rested near the enclosure's edge, watching the stars above. Its breathing was steady, its movements calm, but its eyes never fully closed. There was a quiet dignity in its presence, a sense that it knew its strength, its intelligence, and the value of the humans it had chosen to trust. For the researcher, these moments were almost sacred. They could see the predator not just as a wild animal, but as a being capable of understanding, reflection, and even choice. The world outside continued to debate, but inside the facility, a quiet miracle was taking place. The predator, once a figure of fear, had become a bridge between humans and the wild. Its actions had saved lives, inspired wonder, and challenged assumptions about nature. The bond it had formed with a single human had opened the door to understanding, showing that trust, respect, and care could exist even in situations that seemed impossible. The predator's story was far from over. Its life, its bond with humans, and the decisions being made about its future would continue to unfold. But in this moment, it had shown something extraordinary, that even a creature known for its ferocity could act with intelligence, awareness, and compassion. The humans who had witnessed these acts were changed, inspired, and humbled. They had learned that fear alone could not define the wild, and that understanding, patience, and trust could lead to moments of true connection. The predator remained calm, alert and aware, a living reminder of the fragile balance between fear and trust, power and care, wildness and understanding. Its journey was not yet complete, but it had already taught the humans around it an unforgettable lesson about the potential for connection, even across species. The bond it had formed was quiet, subtle, but undeniable, and it would play a crucial role in the events that were yet to come. The calm routine at the facility was suddenly shattered one afternoon. The sky had darkened with heavy clouds, and the wind began to whip through the trees surrounding the enclosure. It was the kind of storm that made even the most experienced staff uneasy. They had prepared for rain, but no one could anticipate what would happen next. A nearby hillside, loosened by recent rain, began to collapse. Rocks and mud tumbled down toward the lower paths, where workers and visitors were caught off guard. The predator noticed the movement immediately. Its ears twitched, its body went tense, and its eyes followed the approaching danger. The humans nearby barely had time to react. A group of workers had been inspecting the outer fences when the landslide began. They tried to move quickly, but the ground was slippery, and the falling debris created panic. For a moment, it seemed as though chaos would take over. But the predator acted with lightning speed. Without hesitation, it leaped toward the humans, positioning itself between them and the falling rocks. Its massive frame blocked the path of danger, absorbing impacts and creating a safe corridor for the humans to escape. One by one, they scrambled past it, wide-eyed and trembling, as the predator shifted its weight, careful not to let any of the debris strike them. The scene was breathtaking. A creature that had been feared for its strength now used that very strength to protect. Human lives in the most dramatic way imaginable. Researcher who had bonded with the predator was among those caught in the chaos. They watched in awe as the predator guided people to safety, understanding instinctively where danger lay and how to shield them. For a moment, the human felt a mix of fear and admiration. The predator was wild, strong, and unpredictable. Yet in that moment, it was entirely focused on protection, responding not to orders, but to a deep, almost instinctive awareness of human vulnerability. As the storm continued, the predator remained vigilant. It moved carefully, positioning itself wherever the humans were at greatest risk. Its awareness was extraordinary. It seemed to anticipate falling rocks, slippery ground, and sudden surges of mud, moving with precision to ensure no one was harmed. By the time the authorities and emergency teams arrived, the humans had been guided to safety, and the predator stood at the center of the chaos, calm and alert. As if surveying its work, witnesses could hardly believe what they had seen. Some whispered in awe, while others stood silently, trying to process the extraordinary display of intelligence and courage. News crews, already covering the predator's story, captured the event, broadcasting it to the world. For many viewers, it was a revelation. The predator that had been feared and sentenced to death had just saved multiple human lives in a way that no one could ignore. The storm passed, leaving behind mud, broken branches, and damaged fences, but no loss of life. The humans involved were shaken but unharmed. They approached the predator cautiously, offering gestures of gratitude, soft words, and reassurances. The predator responded calmly, its eyes tracking their movements, acknowledging their presence without aggression. The bond with the researcher became even more apparent. The predator approached them briefly, nuzzling gently, as if sharing the quiet relief that all humans were safe. The incident ignited a wave of public reaction. Videos and photographs went viral, showing the predator shielding humans, using its body to block danger, and responding with precision to protect them. People debated fiercely online. Some called for its immediate release or relocation to a sanctuary, arguing that such intelligence and care could not be punished. Others still expressed caution, emphasizing that it was a predator and that its strength could never be fully controlled. Regardless of opinion, everyone agreed on one thing. The predator had proven itself extraordinary. Inside the facility, discussions shifted dramatically. The authorities could no longer ignore the predator's actions. Experts argued passionately that the events of the landslide demonstrated not only intelligence, but a level of awareness and moral-like judgment that had never been documented in a wild animal. Scientists who had been skeptical began to reconsider their assumptions, while those who had long advocated for the predator's life felt vindicated. The idea that fear alone should dictate its fate became increasingly hard to justify. Meanwhile, the predator remained calm and dignified. It moved quietly through its enclosure, alert but not agitated. It seemed to understand the humans' growing attention, yet it did not exploit it. Its focus remained on observation, protection, and the bond it had formed with the researcher. It was clear to anyone who watched closely that the predator's behavior was consistent, deliberate, and purposeful. Every movement had intent, and every choice reflected an awareness that went beyond instinct. The researcher spent long hours documenting the aftermath of the landslide, taking notes and analyzing the predator's actions. They realized that this event could change everything: how humans understood predators, how humans interacted with wildlife, and even how society judged a creature solely based on fear. The predator's courage and awareness were undeniable, and its bond with humans had grown stronger through the trial of the storm. Villagers and staff alike began to see the predator differently. Fear remained, but it was tempered by respect and admiration. People remembered the children it had saved, the workers it had protected, and the calm, deliberate way it acted in a moment of extreme danger. They began to understand that this was not a mindless killer, but a creature capable of complex thought, care, and choice. It had shown that strength and gentleness could coexist, that power could be used for protection rather than harm. The predator's actions during the landslide sparked renewed discussions in the courtroom. Lawyers and officials reviewed the videos, testimonies, and reports, debating whether the death sentence could still stand. Public opinion had shifted dramatically. Newspapers published editorials praising the predator's courage and intelligence, while social media campaigns calling for its release gained momentum. Experts wrote papers arguing that the predator's behavior demonstrated qualities that challenged traditional understanding of instinct and morality in animals. At night, the predator remained calm, sitting near the edge of its enclosure and watching the humans move about. Its eyes followed the researcher in particular, reflecting trust and recognition. The storm had tested its awareness, courage, and intelligence, and it had acted flawlessly. The predator had faced danger not for itself, but for others, showing a level of protection and foresight that few humans could match. The humans who had witnessed the event felt a mix of awe, gratitude, and humility. They realized that fear had been a natural response, but respect and understanding had grown stronger through experience. The predator had earned their trust, their admiration, and their recognition. They also understood that the coming decisions, whether it would remain alive or face execution, would be among the most difficult and important choices they had ever faced. As the facility returned the call, discussions about the predator's future intensified. Experts argued that no other location could replicate the conditions necessary for its protection of humans while maintaining safety. Advocates called for relocation to a sanctuary, emphasizing that its intelligence and care deserved recognition, not punishment. Others cautioned that the predator's strength and unpredictability could never be fully managed. Yet after the landslide, it was impossible to deny the reality. The predator had chosen to protect humans repeatedly and deliberately, even when its own life could have been at risk. The predator's bond with the researcher continued to deepen. It allowed closer interactions, followed subtle gestures, and even seemed to anticipate needs. This bond became a quiet but powerful force, influencing how humans perceived it. The predator had demonstrated its ability to choose, to act with awareness, and to protect without prompting. In doing so, it had challenged everything humans thought they knew about wild animals and their relationship to humanity. The storm incident became a turning point. For the first time, the predator was seen not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a being capable of extraordinary awareness and courage. People began to understand that strength alone did not define danger. Intent, intelligence, and choice mattered more. The predator had risked its life to protect humans, proving beyond doubt that it was capable of understanding, empathy, and deliberate action, even as discussions about its legal status continued. The predator remained composed, calm, and aware. Its presence was a quiet reminder that fear was only one part of the story, and that understanding, trust, and recognition of intelligence could lead to something far greater. Humans had witnessed a living example of courage, protection, and connection, and the world could no longer ignore the truth. This predator was extraordinary, not just for its strength, but for its heart and awareness that the predator's story had reached a critical moment. It had survived the storm, protected humans, and proven its intelligence and care. The coming days would decide whether humans could see it for what it truly was, or whether fear would once again dictate its fate. Regardless of the outcome, the predator had already changed the world's perception of what was possible in the relationship between humans and the wild. The predator had survived storms, dangers in the wild, and captivity, but now the moment of final judgment had arrived. The courtroom was crowded once more, filled with experts, villagers, journalists, and curious onlookers. The air was thick with tension. Some people had come to witness justice. Others came hoping for mercy. No one could predict what would happen, but all knew that this day would decide the life of a creature that had already changed the way humans saw the natural world. The predator entered calmly, as it always had. Its eyes scanned the room, intelligent and aware, and for a moment the crowd felt the weight of its presence. It did not growl, fight, or appear scared. It seemed to understand the importance of this day, aware that its fate rested entirely in the hands of humans. The researcher who had bonded with the predator was close by, offering quiet reassurance with soft gestures, words, and a gentle presence. The predator acknowledged them with a slow, deliberate glance, a silent recognition of trust and understanding. The judge began by reviewing the events that had led to the sentence. Past incidents were listed, as well as the predator's strength and potential danger. The voice of the law was firm, measured, and serious. But before the sentence could be confirmed, witnesses were called again. Villagers, scientists, and the researcher spoke passionately about the predator's intelligence, courage, and repeated acts of protection. The landslide incident, in particular, had become a turning point in public perception. Videos showed the predator shielding humans from falling debris, guiding them to safety, and acting with awareness beyond instinct. One by one, witnesses told their stories. Children remembered being saved, villagers recalled being guided safely through dangerous areas, and experts described its ability to respond deliberately to human gestures. The courtroom listened in stunned silence. No one could deny the evidence of the predator's care and awareness. Yet some officials remained cautious, concerned that its strength could not be fully controlled. Fear still lingered in the room, but it was tempered by respect, admiration, and awe. The researcher was called to speak last. They described the bond that had formed between themselves and the predator, explaining how it had learned to trust, recognize gestures, and even anticipate human needs. They emphasized that this bond was not accidental. It was evidence of intelligence, awareness, and deliberate choice. The courtroom was captivated. For the first time, many humans truly understood that the predator's actions were not random. Not instinct alone, but intentional, purposeful, and protective. As the final arguments concluded, a heavy silence fell over the courtroom. The predator, still calm, observed the humans before it, its eyes reflecting awareness, dignity, and patience. Everyone understood that the coming decision would not just determine its life, but would also send a message about how humans viewed strength, intelligence, and morality in the natural world. The judge paused, considering both law and evidence, fear and compassion, danger and extraordinary behavior. Then, in a voice that echoed through the room, the judge made the decision. The death sentence would be lifted. The predator would not be executed. Instead, it would be relocated to a carefully designed sanctuary, where it could live freely while remaining safe for humans and other animals. There was a collective gasp, followed by murmurs of relief and excitement. The predator's calm presence did not change. It seemed to understand the meaning of the decision, recognizing that humans had chosen to honor its life, courage, and intelligence. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Villagers cheered quietly, journalists reported live, and social media exploded with support. People around the world celebrated the decision, inspired by the idea that fear and prejudice had not determined the predator's fate. Experts debated what this meant for science, wildlife management, and human understanding of predators. The message was clear. Intelligence, awareness, and deliberate care could no longer be ignored. Even in creatures once thought to be dangerous and uncontrollable, the predator was carefully transported to the sanctuary. It moved cautiously at first, observing its new environment with the same intelligence and awareness it had shown throughout captivity. The sanctuary was designed to replicate its natural habitat, with forests, streams, and cliffs. Humans observed from a safe distance, knowing the predator could survive without interference. The researcher who had bonded with it accompanied the move, offering guidance, gentle gestures, and reassurance. The predator acknowledged them with a calm, deliberate gaze, as if understanding that trust and protection still extended across species. Over the following weeks, the predator adjusted to its new home. It explored the forests, climbed cliffs, and waded through streams, using its strength and awareness to navigate safely. Yet it remained attentive to human presence, watching quietly from a distance, sometimes approaching cautiously, always aware of gestures and behavior. Its intelligence was apparent in every move, every observation, and every interaction. The sanctuary had given it freedom, but its bond with humans had remained, built on trust, respect, and recognition of awareness. Visitors to the sanctuary were awed by what they saw. Scientists and experts studied the predator closely, documenting its behavior, intelligence, and care. Children and villagers who had previously feared it watched from safe areas, inspired by its courage and deliberate actions. It became clear that the predator had become more than a wild animal. It was a living lesson in understanding, trust, and the possibility of connection across species. Even in freedom, the predator retained a sense of calm dignity. It moved deliberately, observed humans without fear, and demonstrated awareness that had never been documented before. The researcher continued to interact carefully, maintaining the bond that had been formed during captivity. They noticed subtle behaviors, the predator responding to gestures, following safe paths, and even showing patience when humans approached slowly. These actions confirmed what they had suspected all along. The predator's intelligence, care, and awareness were extraordinary, a true bridge between the wild and humanity. Over time, the predator became a symbol of courage, trust, and understanding. It had survived dangers, storms, captivity, and the threat of death, and it had emerged with dignity and awareness intact. Humans who had once feared it now respected it, recognizing that strength alone did not define danger, and that intelligence, choice, and deliberate action were just as important. The predator's story was shared far and wide, inspiring discussions about morality, fear, and the potential for connection across species. The sanctuary allowed this predator to live freely while maintaining safety for humans and other animals. It explored, hunted, and rested, but it never forgot the humans it had protected. Its awareness of gestures, trust, and care remained evident in every movement. The researcher continued to document its behavior, recording moments that would influence science, conservation, and human understanding for years to come. The predator's legacy grew beyond the sanctuary. People visited, learned, and shared its story. Children were taught about courage and awareness. Scientists debated its intelligence, and the public marveled at the possibility of a predator capable of deliberate care. The world had witnessed something extraordinary. A creature feared for its strength had shown awareness, empathy, and courage that surpassed many expectations. And through it all, the predator remained calm, intelligent, and aware. It had survived every challenge and had formed bonds that proved fear could be replaced by trust. It had faced the judgment of humans and emerged alive, demonstrating that strength and compassion could coexist. Its story became a symbol, a reminder that understanding and care could triumph over fear, and that even the most feared creatures could teach humans profound lessons about awareness, courage, and connection. The researcher often observed the predator at dusk, sitting near the edge of the forest and watching the sky. Its presence was steady, its eyes bright and alert, reflecting awareness, intelligence, and peace. The predator had lived through storms, dangers, captivity, and judgment, and it had emerged stronger, wiser, and more respected than ever. Humans had learned from it, and in return, the predator had trusted them, creating a bond that would last for the rest of its life. In the end, the predator's journey was a story of courage, awareness, and trust. It had defied expectations, challenged assumptions, and inspired humans to see beyond fear. Its life was a testament to the possibility of connection between species, the power of deliberate choice, and the extraordinary nature of intelligence and care. The predator was free, respected, and remembered not as a danger, but as a guardian, a teacher, and a living symbol of the balance between strength and compassion.